Hello there, and welcome to episode 4 of my Lancastrians and Yorkists vlog. This time we're going to be looking at Lollardy as we start the second depth topic in this unit that we're looking through on called Lancastrians and Yorkists, a Wars of the Roses themed course. This depth topic in the EdXL unit is called Henry V and the Conquest of France, 1413 to 21, and you'll notice straight away that this depth topic actually doesn't follow straight on from topic 1. There is an 8-year gap in between. So just briefly, what has happened in those 8 years of significance? The first thing to say is that the French have started fighting amongst themselves and are less of an immediate threat to the English. We'll talk more about that next time. The second thing to note is that in 1406 the King of Scotland died, Robert III, and he was succeeded by 12-year-old James I, who, unhappily for him, had been captured by the English and was held captive for the next 18 years. And this, of course, meant that there was peace between England and Scotland, because you don't want to invade or fight at the time when your king could be very easily executed. Peace with the Scots, a more easy to manage situation with the French. And then thirdly, the Glyndŵr revolt was petering out, being pushed back. For example, in 1409, Harlech Castle was recaptured from the Welsh. And this campaign was led by Henry V, or the future Henry V, in his guise as Prince of Wales. And this, of course, serves the twin purpose, both of giving Henry V military experience and kudos amongst the English nobility, but also of providing a more stable western border for England as well. Two more things, we'll do them in reverse order. In 1408, Henry Percy, the erstwhile Earl of Northumberland, who had fled to Scotland as a result of the failed Scropes Rebellion, returned from Scotland with a smallish army, which nevertheless gets as far as Yorkshire. They always seem to scurry through the north. And Bramham Moore in 1408, he was defeated and killed in the process. And this is the end of problems that Henry IV suffered with the English nobility, and really Henry V doesn't have problems with the English nobility after this either. So more stable all round in England, growing stability on the Welsh border. The Scots are at peace, and the French are squabbling amongst themselves. So a much more peaceful, stable situation. And to chuck into this, the 1406 Parliament in England had also tried to limit Henry IV's power. He had grown unwell, and they were also, the nobility were fed up with the amount of taxes they had to keep paying for all the rebellions that were being fought against Henry IV. And so they limit his power somewhat, partly by giving some power and authority to the Prince of Wales, the future Henry V. So he had also kind of gained political experience there and was already trusted by the nobility as someone who was perhaps better placed than his father to rule England, and had more credibility in doing so. So Henry V's position when he becomes king is a much more stable one, and he goes on to fight and be successful in the wars against France, as this depth topic mostly focuses on. But we have to consider the conditions that made that success possible, and one of those is the challenge of Lollardy, its significance and how it was responded to. And as that kind of sticks out as a slightly separate topic, we're going to deal with it first today. So in 1414, Sir John Oldcastle led a Lollard rebellion against Henry V. And we're going to wind back a little bit and think about what Lollardy was, and then we'll have a look at the story of John Oldcastle, and finally think about the significance of his rebellion. So what was it? Well, in 1377, if you cast your mind back, John Wycliffe, a priest and an academic theologian, was summoned to appear before the Archbishop of Canterbury and other bishops, accused of holding beliefs that were contrary to official church doctrine. Wycliffe, which is spelled Wycliffe, Wycliffe was actually supported in this trial by John of Gaunt, who was a very powerful man at the time, and the outcome's kind of unclear, sort of vague what happens to Wycliffe, but nevertheless he seems to have escaped severe punishment, and 7 years later he dies peacefully of old age. So he seems to have escaped any particular condemnation, but his alleged views were roundly condemned by Pope Gregory XI and become a known heresy. Wycliffe's views which spread were then called or labelled Lollardy, and the people were Lollards, from the Latin for mumblers, partly because they believed that the Holy Spirit was really key to being a Christian. They also rejected key Catholic beliefs like the priesthood, which is a big thing for the Pope, I guess. Things like transubstantiation and purgatory were seen as being non-biblical, unbiblical. They published the Bible in English, which the Catholic Church didn't like at this time either. So just to sort of pause and say, first of all, it was okay at this time to be a critic of the church. That was fine. It's probably why Wycliffe got away with things. But it was not okay to be a heretic. So those views, if you hold them, are heresy. It was all right to sort of say, I prefer the church to be governed in a different way. But and John of Gaunt's support for Wycliffe shows that a pro-church stance had its limits in England. Sending money off to Rome wasn't very popular, and a powerful pope meant less powerful kings on the whole in Europe as well. So there is a limit to the support that the Pope and the Catholic Church get. But most kings are very staunchly pro-church for three sort of big reasons. First of all, the coronation oath is to God and the Church. And social expectation is that the king will be a Catholic, and most people in the country were Catholics too, and they would expect the king to believe the same stuff that they did. Also, because the king's position and status was partly dependent upon being divinely appointed, God's anointed king. And then thirdly, because the Pope was quite a powerful enemy to have. If you fell out with the Pope, it was quite big trouble for you, because the population would be upset if he placed England or parts of England under what was called an interdict. That's I-N-T-E-R, interdict, D-I-C-T, which basically would stop there being any sacraments, any marriages or burials or communion, all the sort of things that make Christianity Christian, I suppose, or Catholicism at least, Catholic. And that would be unpopular with anyone who believed that the Catholic Church was right. So, because of this, the royal response to Lollardy was harsh from the start. In 1401, a law made the punishment for Lollardy burning. William Sawtrey was the first victim of that in March 1401, so they got straight on with it. So, Lollardy was as a heresy that was being stamped down, but it did grow and flourish. There were quite a few people around the country who believed in it or were sympathetic to it, one of whom was Sir John Oldcastle. Now, he was a soldier, a trusted soldier and leader in the English army that fought in Wales under Henry V as Prince of Wales. And as a result of that link, he married well and gained a lot of land and a title through his marriage. We don't know where his religious views came from or when he became a Lollard, but they're definitely there by 1410 when he wrote a letter to Bohemia, which is in modern-day Czechia, in praise of two individuals protesting against the church there. And in 1410 he was involved in proposing a bill in Parliament through his position in the House of Lords, which would have confiscated church land and made it harder to prosecute heretics. This action set off some alarm bells and probably is one of the reasons that the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time goes on a renewed round of campaigning against heresy. This is Thomas Arundel, the Archbishop of Canterbury. The first victim of that was John Badby of Evesham, who was burned for denying transubstantiation. That was in 1410, and Henry V attended that burning as a sign of his conventional beliefs in the Catholic Church and support for the Catholic Church, which isn't under question at any point in this, any point really by historians. Arundel then further in his campaign accused Oldcastle's chaplain of spreading heresy on the Hoo Peninsula in Kent. Hoo is H-O-O, that's just a place in Kent. The churches on the peninsula were initially put under interdict by Arundel, but then he sort of relented and let them off. During this time, however, Oldcastle still seems to have been trusted by Henry V, and he sent off to France to lead troops against Orleans in 1411, or Oldcastle was being kept out of harm's way by Henry V, which is kind of a support in itself. However, in 1413, things get more serious. Another Oldcastle chaplain was questioned by Arundel, and in May 1413, a raid found a heretical book which was owned by Oldcastle. So this is really serious for him. And in August 1413, he was prosecuted and sentenced to death for heresy. But again, Henry V seems to have intervened and to protect him, and he was actually locked up in the Tower of London for 40 days to be given a chance to repent. Instead of repenting, Sir John Oldcastle manages to escape from the Tower of London, which is a bit suspicious, really. To do so, probably, we don't know, but probably he would have had help, either from inside or from outside, maybe both. Anyway, Oldcastle gets out of the tower, flees to the Welsh borders, and from there he starts to try and gather support from Lollards in the Midlands, in the southwest, and in the southeast as well, for a rebellion. There had been Lollards who had plotted to kill the king before, or muttered about killing the king and replacing him. This was a rebellion either to do that, or possibly to kidnap Henry V and persuade him to join their cause. That's a bit fanciful, but given Oldcastle's past links with the king, it's possible that he thought that was going to be achievable. Maybe. Anyway, in January 1414, a rumoured 25,000 Lollards were going to join the plot, and the plan was, probably not for all of them, to infiltrate Eltham Palace in London, where the king was staying, at Epiphany, which is just after Christmas, disguised as actors. So clearly not 25,000 actors, but a few of them anyway, disguised as actors, and then to kidnap or kill the king. However, this plot was uncovered by spies and through intelligence, and the whole thing was scotched before it could even take place. This in itself enhances Henry V's reputation. He's seen as having God on his side, and not least of all being clever and astute. The plot itself kind of folds quite easily. There weren't 25,000 people coming, or even 20,000 as some books suggest, but only 220 plotters who were kind of definitely pinpointed as being involved. Of those, a number escape, including Oldcastle, but 69 were convicted, 31 of whom were hanged. 7 more were hanged and burned at the same time. So this is the end of the Lollard plot, but Oldcastle goes on the run, off to Wales. He perhaps tries to get support in Wales and Scotland for further rebellion before being finally captured in 1417, by which time he'd lost respect and support or sympathy really from all of his peers, and the trial in Parliament was particularly hostile towards him. During that trial, he declared his loyalty to Richard II, said that he was alive and well in Scotland, which clearly wasn't true. And after being convicted of treason, he was dragged through the streets of London before being suspended by an iron chain and then hanged and burned simultaneously. In the aftermath of the plot in 1414, Parliament had passed a law against Lollards or Lollardy, increasing secular power against heresy, the power of Parliament and the king. For instance, in carrying out executions. This, by the way, is a sign of the growing link between heresy and treason. Acting against God and the church is seen as being part of acting against king and country. And that's a development which grows legs after the Reformation as well, the establishment of the Church of England, which is not really anything to do with what we're talking about here. Also, during this time period, in 1411, a law was passed against riots, the Riot Act of 1411, which strengthened the government's powers, increasing the ability to fine, gave more powers to courts to deal with cases locally, and to investigate where local authorities had failed to do so. So let's pause and think about how important or significant was Lollardy as a threat to Henry V. Well, on the plus side, or on the significant side, Sir John Oldcastle is a semi-prominent figurehead for this campaign, and he escapes from the tower and again from the actual plot, so he's quite elusive. and he seems to have gone on perhaps to plot with the Welsh and Scots, and in theory at least pulled together quite a lot of support for the initial plot too, that sort of rumoured 20 to 25,000 supporters. Also, those two statutes, those two laws against riots and against the Lollards show that Parliament felt compelled to act, and of course the way that they tried and then executed Oldcastle himself shows, and hunted him down I guess for 4 years as well, shows that they felt they had to act and deal with this, which suggests that they felt it was not something they could just kind of ignore. Also, in 1415, there was alleged Lollard support for the Southampton plot, which shows that they kind of had an ongoing hand in plots against the king. But all that said, it's hard really to make a convincing case that there was a really significant threat from Lollardy at this time. Remember that at the actual plot, there were only 220 people that turned up. I say only 69 people were executed. That is a lot of people executed, and you might say that makes it significant, but we're talking about 69 in the whole country as part of this plot against the king. And although Oldcastle himself had some prominence, he's not like the Duke of Northumberland or the Duke of Norfolk. He's not a sort of major peer. And bear in mind that they don't really have anyone to replace Henry V with. There's no sort of clear kind of succession planning for that. So they might even be trying to persuade him to stay on, but as a Lollard king, which is completely kind of crazy talk. Also, of course, Oldcastle was captured again in 1417 and executed, so it's definitely all over by then. And even before then, there's no further plot after 1414. Although they support the Southampton plot, I would argue that support did not actually have any impact on the Southampton plot or make it more dangerous, and we'll talk about that next time. So, in summary, the Lollard threat was real, but it was, I would argue, quite small and niche, rather than being something that could end the king or even really threaten his reign. I hope that's helpful. Next time we'll talk a little bit about the Southampton plot and the early stages of Henry's campaign against France. See you then.